Hey everybody, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connarton, making my triumphant return.
Triumphant,
yes. Now with even more hair. I've been growing it out.
Really?
Yeah.
Extra?
I've been getting this is the longest my hair has been in forever. I've been getting a lot of compliments on it, so whatever.
Really?
Although I've been told I have too much chest hair.
Yes, you probably should do something about that.
And we have to our right, of course, the Honorable Gary S. Hopper. And I was just looking, the door was opening. I thought perhaps our guest was here. Is our guest here?
Yes.
And our guest
is here.
Our guest is here.
Whoa!
We thought we were screwed.
This is the first time a guest has actually showed up, I think, Matt.
Is it? Well, first time in at least a week.
At least a week.
Yes.
Yeah, at least a week since last week, probably.
I wasn't here last week, but your daughter, your favorite daughter, did a lovely job.
My favorite daughter, yes, she did. Did you watch?
I did.
You did?
Part of it, yes. I didn't see the whole thing.
She's my favorite daughter's pretty awesome.
Yes.
Marilinda Garcia. I know. No,
that'd be weird.
I better not. I can't say yes to that even if I wanted to. I'd get the crap beat out of me. How are you, young lady?
I'm fine. I apologize. We ran around.
Yeah, I know the parking's. I forgot to mention. Usually, I text people. I say parking is a pain, but I forgot to do that. Okay, so first I want to start with woe is me.
I know.
I was coming. There's a leather shop downstairs. And I was going to have some work done. And so I was coming north on Elm Street. It's really ironic because I had just taken my grandson to the, what do you call doctors that work on your joints? Not cardiologist. You know which one I mean.
Joints?
Yeah, works on...
a jointologist?
Yeah, a jointologist. Anyway, up at Elliott at the river's edge.
Okay.
I was just taking him from his doctor's appointment. I was heading up Elm Street, going to the leather shop, and I stopped at the. I had watched that thing, you know, the Somerville. The cops are like all over people for not stopping for pedestrians.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was aware of that because I watched that like Tuesday or Wednesday night. And then this is on Thursday morning, and I saw a couple of ladies trying to cross a crosswalk, so I stopped. And that's the next thing I remember is hearing a loud crash. I was on the motorcycle. My little buddy Scotty is on the back. I hear a crash, but it sounded like it was somewhere else, not associated with me. And then the next thing I know is I'm standing up. This arm is kind of just hanging by my side. And the only thing I was doing was looking for Scotty, see where he was. He got thrown about 10 feet.
Oh, really?
Gosh.
And
I didn't realize that.
Oh,
wow.
yeah, poor little guy. But the cool thing he was upset. He was standing up, and he was very upset, which is good. Because that means he's not completely knocked out or completely wiped out. If he's upset, that means he's aware of his circumstances.
Yeah.
So he was okay, but I guess... The kid that hit me, 17-year-old kid, said that he just looked away for a second or so, and he was very shook up. The kid was obviously upset, and I posted this on Facebook, and everybody says, "Oh, you should do this and you should do that," and it's like all of them forget that they were 17 once, and probably all had fender benders.
Oh yeah, I wrecked a car.
Oh yeah,
when I was 17. Yeah.
So I'm not angry.
Did.
Huh? You didn't? You're a good girl?
I've been fortunate car-wise, thankfully, and I drive a lot.
Your dad must love you that much more. So anyway, they're all saying this stuff, and it's just BS. I mean, people have accidents. The only difference is when you hit a motorcycle, it's a lot bigger than a fender bender.
Yeah. And
anyway, what I was wanting to run this by you is they were saying you should do something about this, and I said, well, he's 17 years old. So the odds are he was girl watching, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
So what do you think about a law that requires all women to be in burqas to prevent this from happening again?
I would be a lawbreaker.
Okay, well, at least she's honest.
It would probably be unconstitutional or something.
Maybe. Yeah, but anyway, so I got, they think that I got to go to MRI on Monday, and I think I got a torn rotator cuff or something. But I can't do this with this arm. I can still do this. But I can't actually elevate my arm. But whatever, stuff happens.
You had to borrow an automatic to drive here today.
Plus, this actually comes in handy because I'm too homophobic to have a Merce, so I right, so I can
Are we on the air right now?
Yeah,
We
we're on
are.
there.
Yes.
It gets worse too.
I assume you
Sorry,
haven't seen the
'cause-
show.
Well, I was just taking it all
No,
in,
if she
but
had
I
seen
guess
the
I
show,
should be
she
more
never would've showed up.
participatory.
Right, that's
Sorry.
true.
Yeah, that's true.
And just to clarify, Gary's comment about it gets worse, he's not kidding when he says
Yeah,
that. It
Okay.
really does get
it
worse.
gets a lot
yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
So anyway, young lady, you're running for Congress, and I was
am.
delighted to support you. And I want to tell you one reason why is people tell me all the time that as a legislator, one of the most important thing you can do is vote with your constituents. And I always tell them, no, not really. And I give the example of if there was a shooting at a local school and everybody in town said, we need you to support good gun control legislation. Regardless of what the consensus is, the fact of the matter is the first thing I did was to swear to uphold the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And that trumps everything else. And people were complaining about you because you're from Salem and you didn't support the casino. Mm-hmm. And how horrible was that you didn't support your constituents. And to me, it showed the strength of character to do what you knew was right, regardless of whether or not you might or might not get reelected because of it. Because we have enough people in Washington, D.C. who only care about getting reelected. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to commend you on that, and that was one of the votes that helped me sway my support, as ridiculously insignificant as that is, in your favor, because you do what's right versus what is popular.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So anyway, we got you on here because I wanted the voters to have a chance to get to know you. How did you get involved in this? There's got to be some motivation.
In
Do you
the
really just
congressional
like
race,
it?
or
Well,
no.
first you became a state
Yes.
legislator.
Yes.
And unless you really like hanging out with old people, I don't understand why you would be involved.
I will say there have been a few times during break in our committee lounge room where we're around the water cooler. I'm like, this is my peer group, huh? This is interesting. But
It's nice to feel young,
Yeah.
right? You know?
no, but I got involved in elected office, one could say, or participatory democracy. When I was 23, I finished college, got a part-time job, and was looking for something else to fill my time with. Mm-hmm. And the midterm elections of 2006 were coming around, so I thought, why don't I work on a campaign? So I was looking around for a candidate that might need help, or who would support obviously my values, etc. And someone suggested, why don't you consider running yourself for state representative? So I thought that's a good way to make sure my values are represented. And so I figured, okay, I understand the rudimentary aspects of this. Let people know who you are, why you're running, what
Kiss
you believe
babies,
in,
stuff like that.
etc. And so I ran, and I ended up winning.
Was that an easy decision to run? Because that's a big leap, going from supporting a candidate behind the scenes to being the candidate.
Well, to be honest, I think I had a little bit of naivete about,
Really?
I thought, okay, let me run,
Sure.
we elect people. I have an opinion, and
Yeah.
so sure, why don't I run?
Yeah.
I wasn't particularly thinking about, who will be in the legislature. Certainly, I thought, what skills do I have, that can translate to being an elected representative? But the point of the process and system we have is that everyone should be represented, more or less. And New Hampshire, I think, is one of the most pure and transparent. Certainly, I would say nationwide, one of the best, and then probably even globally in terms of, lack of corruption and having an active citizen
I know, because I've been up there
participation.
since 2000. I got first elected. I'm looking for ways to be corrupted, and I can't even find them.
Right. Right.
The best I've done, I've found some places to get free lunches and stuff.
Yes.
But that's like it.
Yeah.
But that's pretty
So-
good.
That's pretty good. But,
Free food is always good.
So then when it came to running for Congress, I wrapped up, I was in my 4th term as a state legislator. Mm-hmm. And as you know, it's a volunteer position. So I've been doing a number of different other jobs, in the meantime, and working on initiatives that I was passionate about and I thought, were helpful and reform minded, etc. In particular in healthcare, on more closely tying the dollar to quality through pricing transparency, open data and insurance claims, portability of health insurance, all of these things that I think make things more innovative, flexible, and consumer-oriented. And then also in economic development when it comes to our tax policy and our regulatory environment. So in any case, those are things I was working on. And what I found was that we can work really hard on the state level to make the decisions that best address the challenges and problems our state has. But if we're not being, never mind supported on the federal level, but they're actually enacting and mandating laws that pretty much just make everything we're working on meaningless, particularly, of course, the example of this was in healthcare.
Right.
I worked for years, we all did, on a lot of these things. I know we've co-sponsored stuff. And then the ACA comes along and, it just blows it all out of the water. So I thought clearly the change needs to happen on a higher level, that is in federal office as a rep, and Representative Kuster was not representing our state.
Really?
And so
did you get those mailings at
the franking?
No, since January, it's like every 2 months I get these mailings from Kuster. And it's this. And the thing is, once you run for office, you start to get an appreciation of how much mailings cost.
Yeah.
and there are these. I think they're 4x8 cards, glossy cards, and it's got a big picture of Kuster and the stuff. It's supposed to be that they're allowed to use their mailing as a congressperson to inform the voters. And so on the back, it'll have some vague reference to, meet the veterans who might need help or something like that. But it's obviously an ad for Kuster.
Oh, yeah.
And it says paid for by taxpayers.
Well, the issue here is that most candidates will send, a little postcard, to your point, that says, oh, I'm having a town hall, come and voice your concerns, air your grievances, etc. Kuster hasn't had town halls, so she can't advertise that. But she's also spent more on these glossy campaign-style mailings than the entire rest of the federal delegation combined.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
6 times. Yeah.
It was $250,000, I think, in taxpayer money sent to re-elect her.
Yeah. So
it's pretty sleazy.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I get a... this is in the motorcycle that got crushed, so it got a little bit wet and stuff. So
Or at least you had that sling to carry it in,
now I do, yeah.
so you don't have to use immerse.
Oh yeah, that was Second Amendment. I had your competitor in the primary, and I asked him about the Second Amendment. I want to know where you stand on it and why.
Sure. That is a right enshrined for us to have the ability to protect ourselves, our family, and our property from any nefarious forces that seek to do us harm. And furthermore, should we get to a point where the government, which I don't think anybody should have an inherent trust in, it's great when it's working well. It's great when we have, honest elected officials that do have the best interests of our country and citizens in mind. But we've seen in history all around the world that all it takes is, enough power, money, ego, and malintent, and you can have a disaster and a place where you are subjugated, as a citizen. So anyway, if it comes to that, we have the right to be armed and to do something about it as well. So that's it. I support the Second Amendment unequivocally.
Okay. Yeah, because that was one of the things that in this program, I don't know, for how long we've been doing this?
We started in 2011, so I think it was in the summer, wasn't it? So it's been
a while. But one of the reoccurring things I drive home is the absolute necessity for the power to be maintained in the hands of the people. Mm-hmm. Because as soon as that balance gets too lopsided, then we become the subjects of the government instead of the government being our subject or our servant.
Right.
We become its servant, which is what's been happening. The other thing I wanted to agree with you on is the the federal government, I was in my first term as a legislator. One of the things I noticed right away, I was working full time, and I picked a Fish and Game Committee because it's actually kind of fun, and the workload isn't great. And somebody had introduced a bill to require your Social Security number to be on all fishing and hunting licenses.
Seems a bit dramatic.
Dramatic, exactly. So the question to the sponsor was, well, why do we have to do this? Yeah. And it was the federal government had required us to do that, or we were going to lose federal funding.
As usual.
As usual.
Extortion, in other words.
So fundamentally, I was working.
Here you go, or else.
Right. Or else. So fundamentally, I was working all week, paying the federal government taxes. They were taking those taxes to use to extort, to take away power from the states, and that's all it was doing. You know.
Yeah, I support the 10th Amendment. That's big. I think the best decisions are made closest to the problem at hand, meaning the individual, family, community.
Tell the people what the 10th Amendment is so that
it's states' rights, basically.
Right, okay.
So, so any problem, in any of these agencies, any of these departments, whatever the case may be, where it's relevant to the state, be it healthcare, education, whatever, the state should be in charge of those funds, not this, here's your money with the attached strings.
Yeah,
right.
I absolutely agree. That's one of the things. I used to be a Democrat, and now I'm an independent. But one of the things that drove me out of the Democratic Party was I believe that with what you just said. I agree with that. And I think things would work much more efficiently and effectively if that's how everything were done. So that's...
Well, I mean, we're a huge country, and you can't tell me, look, especially come back to healthcare, it's just the most obvious thing right now. New Hampshire and California, completely different populations, completely different issues, completely different healthcare ecosystems. Why would you say, okay, now you're all going to be treated exactly the same? Yeah.
Right, yeah, I agree with you.
I also like the concept of, I forget how they always phrase it, of each state being its own experiment.
Yeah, right. We see, did that work well in that state? Maybe we can, adopt that but tweak it to meet our needs as we best know. Or, clearly that was a disaster. Let's not go down that road.
Right. That's the example I use is Romney Care. New Hampshire can look at Romney Care and say, hey, that was really cool. That worked good. The price of healthcare went down and the quality went up, or whatever happened. I don't think that's actually what happened, but you see that and say, "Wow, we're gonna implement that." Or like you say, "Okay, that part of that worked really cool, but this was not so great."
Right.
But as long as we have those
the flexibility,
the flexibility to do that, it's great. But if the federal government does it and it's a disaster, then everybody's nailed.
Right. Well, and right now we have the perfect example, and that is the VA. So, I mean, why do we want that for all of the states and everybody? Never mind, just veterans. Like, they were focusing on one population,
and they did it badly.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, I think it was a few years ago. It was the. Do you remember which veterans hospital? The director of the hospital was jogging around this hospital, and it was completely.
Is that Walter Reed?
Walter Reed.
Yeah.
It was just a horror show.
Oh yeah.
And why you would think that was really great for the government, especially the IRS. The IRS is gonna have its hand in healthcare.
Oh yeah. I mean, there you go. They can't even be trusted. Never mind the fact that. Do they do their job?
Do they do their job? But,
I mean, this is an agency that can turn your life upside down in an instant.
Absolutely.
But yet they're not accountable, and we know, this isn't just theory, that they were taking people's personal information and persecuting them just for their political association and expression of their beliefs. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. I mean, as a conservative, I can't imagine if they were in charge of my health care. We were going to fix your rotator cuff, but I noticed you voted for Romney last term. Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
It's scary. That's sad. Sad we're scared.
Oh, actually, I don't have my regular list. I had a list.
Do you have your irregular list?
I have my irregular list. The The other one was your position on like the NSA.
What's your
NSA?
question? Yes.
In other words, how do you feel about the government having that much?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Not in terms of are they acting, in the wrong way, are they breaching our privacy, etc. But when it comes to cyber terror, there's a lot to be worried about, when it comes to our public utilities, critical infrastructure, financial services, retail, everything. Cyber terrorism is one of the greatest threats we have. It recently outpaced, drug trafficking as the most high-dollar criminal activity. There are state-sponsored terrorists. And so, and the NSA ties into that in terms of the big data heuristics and, all that they do. But, there comes a point where, okay, are we giving up our privacy and in the name of potential security, and then there's what is the government's role in this and how do they deal with it appropriately. Sure, Snowden was wrong in that he compromised some of, frankly, our intelligence. People's lives were at risk because of it. Some of our investigations were compromised. All that. At the same time, I think he did do a service in letting us know that, hey, this is what's going on right now. Exactly.
They're not just cherry picking certain words that are happening to go through the net. They're collecting everything you do.
So as of now, I do think there is a lot of gray area, in terms. So as of now, the way I've tried to parcel it out is that, there are things, though it's getting more difficult to resist, having basically the digital space in everything we do.
Right.
Some of it is still voluntary. Nobody's forcing you to be on Facebook. Nobody's forcing you to use online banking, all of this kind of thing. So you have to understand that when you do that, assume it's not secure, assume everybody can see your stuff, and assume there's a risk.
Yeah.
However, now that we've gotten to the point where the government says, you must go to healthcare.gov and choose one of these plans and give us all your information, be it the IRS, the ACA, whatever. And then they have your information. To your point, the phishing game thing, here, give us your social security number, we'll keep it in a database. That's problematic.
Right.
So they shouldn't be able to compel you to do that.
Your mentioning of Facebook is interesting because, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about all this myself, but I do think it's kind of a funny irony that with things like Facebook and some of these other applications that we use as a culture, we're very upset about losing our privacy at the precise moment that we're willingly giving it away.
Exactly.
It's kind of interesting.
Well, no, I don't look at it the same way in that if I'm on Facebook, like you say, giving my information away, Facebook is a private company.
Right.
I'm not as feel threatened as much by Facebook as I do the government.
But a lot of people do get up in arms about what Facebook does.
To the best of my knowledge, Facebook doesn't have guns yet.
To the best of your knowledge.
To the best of my knowledge. They don't have a standing army yet.
That we know of.
So the government having that information
I agree.
is problematic in that...
Sure.
With
the IRS, they can use it against you.
Yeah, okay.
And then they're the government, and that means you are against the law,
right.
somewhere or another.
Well, it's not just that; it's over time. If you've got a 16-year-old kid growing up in this culture, they're 40 years old and they're doing some important job, or let's say they're a news reporter and they've just found out something great against the president of the United States, or they found some great thing against a congressperson, and they're about to write this article, and somebody from the NSA calls up and says, "You can do this. We have all this information on you. Your career is going to be gone."
Yeah.
It's a really dangerous thing to give the federal government that much information about anybody.
Yeah.
So I think I agree with the international terrorism as far as them being able to hack into our communications or our power supplies and everything else is a very dangerous thing. But I don't think it justifies the federal government collecting everything I post on Facebook, except some things probably because they're pretty bad.
Yeah. I've noticed.
Yeah, I know. What did I want to touch on was Common Core. What's your position on Common Core? Because that's been a big one, because that's another federal takeover of education.
My take on anything, again, that is theoretically they sound good, right? So it says we need to have these standards because that way if your child leaves 5th grade in New Hampshire and moves to 5th grade in, just name a state, Arkansas, they can seamlessly integrate. Okay, theoretically sounds good, but what if New Hampshire, for whatever reasons, is ranked number 4 in the nation, and Arkansas is ranked number 38. Guess what happens when you standardize? Right? But guess what happens when you standardize? Everyone doesn't become number 4.
Right.
You're reduced to the lowest common denominator.
Right.
So, again, I think you need the flexibility and adaptability. I've always supported local control and the widest variety and array of educational options. That way, every unique child's needs have a chance to be met. Everyone should be able to escape a failing school, and parents should be able to use whatever means necessary, meaning public school, homeschool, public or private charter school, digital school, community college. I don't care. You should be able to make that decision. You best know your kid.
Right. Now, you were partially homeschooled. How long? What grades?
Well, I did a correspondence course, so I technically graduated from high school at home, yet I also attended my Salem High to take AP classes and different stuff.
Oh, okay. So it was like
again, we did what worked for us, right? I don't have a lab at home. I couldn't be in literature discussion groups with myself,
Right.
But this was before all this digital stuff.
I could do that.
Really?
Well, you have imaginary friends, so that's different.
We also have a lab at my house. I call it a reloading bench.
Oh.
You could call it a lab, but it's mixing gunpowder and bullets.
But the point is, my parents are taxpayers in the town. We have the school. I wanted to make use of the resources, and it worked out great.
That is cool. It should be at least that flexible.
Yeah.
Are you surprised, by the way, as Republicans, how many Republicans there are who actually seem to like Common Core? I mean, I know most of them don't, but there are some, like Jeb Bush, for example. Every time I hear him open his mouth, he's all excited about it, and it's surprising to me.
Well, his dad, his father was the one who got through, with the help of Judd Gregg and Ted Kennedy, got through No Child Left Behind, I think it was. Correct?
Yeah.
Well, I just think, again, it's problematic when the powers that be decide, you know what, let's just change the way we teach math. You know, it's like, I don't know. It's...
The other big problem with that, besides, first of all, I'm opposed to the federal government doing that at all. Like, you just go back to the 10th Amendment. I don't have any problem with the federal government setting up, being a conduit where you can get information and help facilitate information going back and forth to states. And I don't have any problem with the states all agreeing together to do something. I have an absolute problem with the federal government stepping in and telling us what we're going to do or not going to do, and if you don't do it, you're going to lose this money. Jeez, I was going to make a point. Remember what it was?
I don't. I'll have to check my. I'll check my data banks and see if it's in there.
So
we reread your mind.
We got to get Norm back.
Oh yes,
Get Norm back. Read my mind.
He probably left.
Yeah, he probably left. Nice. Yeah, that was interesting. What was the nexus between you first started on music in college and then you went to politics?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really...
Is that like two opposite sides of the brain going on there? Or?
What's wrong with that?
No, nothing wrong with that.
Some people use their whole brains.
No, not me.
In fact, I mean, that wasn't, one thing didn't lead to the other or anything. I have a lot of interests, and my first sort of thing I wanted to do when I finished college and going through it, I wanted to be an orchestral harpist. And I was actively pursuing that, and I've traveled to, around 30 countries, playing with orchestras and all of this kind of thing, and it's great. But at the end of the day, there's only one harp position in every major orchestra. You don't know when they'll open. So it just wasn't something I frankly was committed enough to just keep
you
auditioning.
basically
and
didn't
do
have the
that.
courage to kill the person that was in the...
You got to be
That
ruthless
is-
if you're going to
yeah,
be a harpist.
just exactly. It takes
So-
a lot of...
so I
unless you
thought-
got mafia connections.
Right,
Then
right.
you can get...
So I just decided to pursue some other interests, and then I explained.
Okay.
How I
Okay.
ended up doing
I just noticed that today, and I was like, "That's interesting." So I knew you were a harpist because I saw that some of your stuff on Facebook when you were first elected, and I thought that was pretty cool. Oh yeah, if and when you get elected, I hope it's more when than if. I would. One of the things that's aggravated the crap out of me is the total lack of courage people have in Congress. An example would be in, I think it was 2003, the United States Supreme Court passed down a decision to allow the city of New London, Connecticut, to take the property around the Thames River from Susan Kelo, the Kelo decision.
Okay.
Okay, do you remember that?
I was in college at the
Okay.
time, and I
Anyway,
don't remember.
I was up in Ware trying to take Souter's house at the time.
Okay.
Fundamentally, what it said was, prior to that, in eminent domain cases, you could take people's property. I think Adams referred to it as a tyrannical power. In other words, it was in the Constitution, but only supposed to be used limitedly.
Sure.
At first, it was basically for infrastructure or to build like a naval base or something like that, so that the government could say, hey, you really have to sell our property. We need to build a naval base, or we need to build this dam so that not everybody dies downstream
Right.
every spring, and things like that. Everybody understood that. Really was, I don't think there was much conflict. Roads, trains were big. That was the first time, I think trains were the first time they used a private company was given the power of eminent domain to build the trains to go across America. Then it morphed a little bit to blighted areas. There was Washington, D.C. had an area where there was, it was so blighted that there was open sewerage, there was rats and things like that. And even though people had property rights, the state stepped in or the city stepped in and said, no, we're taking this property. It's not healthy. And the Supreme Court upheld that. And then we went, because that's what it is. It's always these incremental changes that are the problem. In the Susan Kelo case, there was a bunch of middle-class homes near the Thames River, and the people from Pfizer wanted to build basically condos and tennis courts on it. And the city of New London handed over the power of eminent domain to a private group who basically fed papers to all these people in that area and saying, we're taking your property through the power of eminent domain. Susan Kelo fought that, and it went to the Supreme Court, and Judge David Souter, who used to live in Ware, and the 4 other justices said that was okay, because the city thought it might make money and produce jobs. That decision was one of the most horrific decisions in recent memory. The reason being, if the state or city can decide to take people's property just because they think they can make money, that meant everybody's property is up for grabs. Anybody that has lakefront property that they've had for generations,
Sure.
if somebody's politically connected well enough, they can take the property. Okay? It was an amazingly affront to the Constitution and the principles of the Constitution. And the fundamental principle in the Constitution is the ability to make, earn, and gain property and keep it and secure it.
Right.
And so if the state can take it at any point in time, or politically connected can, it's
The right to private property is what basically got our nation started, and the whole concept of American exceptionalism and, individual freedom, and frankly, all of what at larger scales we see when there's competition and there's an incentive to make the most of yourself, then everyone succeeds.
Exactly. And if that incentive is taken away because it can just arbitrarily be taken from you,
Right.
You
Right.
lose.
Or if it's public.
Yeah. So my frustration was that there wasn't anybody in Congress who had the nerve to get up and say, no, we're going to fight this. Because Congress can start trying to, I forget how they do it procedurally, but can actually override the Supreme Court in a decision. But they didn't, because there's too much money to be made, you know?
Right.
So that's what part of my frustration is. It doesn't seem to be anybody in Congress that has any real courage.
Oh, God, no.
Huh?
I said, oh, God, no.
You take a look at, and this is something I'd like to see you do if you get up there, is Lois Lerner.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Sorry.
Lois Lerner, when questioned about the IRS, we go back to the IRS and its abuses. First thing she did before Congress was plead the fifth. Not the first thing. She went on a diatribe about how wonderful the things are, and then pled the fifth. I would like to see legislation that if any state official pleads the fifth when they're being asked about their job, they should be fired. That should be reason for dismissal immediately.
Sounds logical.
I don't know. That sounds dangerously like accountability to me.
Oh, yeah, I guess you can't have that.
I don't know if you want to venture into that.
But to me, it's she's our employee.
Right.
Right? She comes before Congress and she pleads the fifth. If you had a private company and you had the president of that company call you into his office and say, you know, Marilinda, we have a problem. Well, we have some reports that something happened in your office. I need you to explain to me what's going on. I says, I plead the fifth. I might be incriminating myself. What's he going to do? You're gone. It's no question. It's insane what's going on in D.C.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. It's my diatribe, I guess.
When I got fired from my last job, I got my boss called me into the office and said to me, Marilinda, we have a problem. And then I just left.
What else would you like to cover? What other subjects have you been covering when you're going around the state? Because you've been doing a lot of kissing babies and pounding the pavement.
Yeah. I talk about the things that concern people, a lot of what we've covered today, but basically there's just a breakdown of trust at all with the citizens and the government, and it's not just because we're wild conspiracy theorists. It's because we see with our own eyes, and there's evidence, and that not only fine, we can forgive mistakes. Okay, if Benghazi was a security lapse, but when then they cover it up and blatantly lie, to us about what happened and why, I mean, that's unacceptable. And then there should be accountability. Same thing with the IRS. Same thing with the Affordable Care Act. It's one thing to debate, policy and say, well, we have a mandate because we won the elections and this is what we're going to do. But the way they went about it parliamentarily, the way they lied, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your health care, this, that, the other. I mean, it's just all false. It's just false, And then they foist it on us. So that's what people are concerned about.
Is that what? Sorry, I've been not getting much sleep. Every time I try to sleep, I move the arm this way. It starts. So it's constant.
Oh wow!
They offered me Percocets, but I don't like doing that stuff.
Yeah, you're better off in the long run if you can tough it out.
I'd rather go without sleep.
Yeah.
Sorry, cutie. Oh yeah, the one of the things you've done since you've been in the legislature is you were the one of the co-chairs of the House Republican Alliance. You want to say what that is and what?
Yeah, that's a really important organization, and it's less about the organization; it's more about the function. That we're all there. We swear to uphold the Constitution, and that's of course the state, but also the federal U.S. Constitution. And then sure, I don't know that anybody has their platforms memorized, Democrat or Republican, but allegedly when you if you're a Republican, you more or less support the Republican platform. So in any case, when there's so much legislation coming through the pipeline, in the House all the time, there comes a point where it's easy to lose your I guess analysis in terms of oh, is this a good idea for this issue, that
Sure.
issue, this is complex, that is complex. So the function of the House Republican Alliance was every piece of legislation we will vet according to the Constitution and the Republican platform. And then we'll offer a recommendation on that based on how it measures up. So I think that's a really useful thing.
Yeah.
And that way, people, again, something may sound like a good idea, but if you find it's against Article such and such, just blatantly, you ought not be supporting it.
Sure.
Right. I know I used that big time when I was first in, because I was working full time and doing this. And I'd come into the house, and you just can't read all the bills.
No.
On any given day.
Right. Well,
I don't
that's
know
the
how
other
many-
thing. You can't even understand half the time because you see the subject heading, you see a blurb that was written by someone in the committee, but what does this actually do?
Right.
So it's good to take the extra time.
And the other thing cool about the HRA is we'll have like one or two people on each committee who
Give
explain
input.
it to the HRA and say,
Right.
well, this is
Yeah.
why we're doing it.
Right.
So
Okay.
that when we come down with a recommendation, it's kind of it's usually a pretty good indicator that if we're for it, it's constitutional
Sure.
and it sticks with the Republican platform of lower taxes and all the other fun stuff. The other thing is federal taxes and stuff like that. How are you going to play out on that? I mean, do you think that the fact that there's so many people in the United States that are already paying 30 to 40% of their income, is that enough?
I think we have problems on every end of the spectrum on that, meaning, we can talk about our corporate tax rate. Very high, amongst Western industrialized countries, yet the companies that are able to find those loopholes actually only pay 20%, 15%, or in the
Right.
case of
Very
some
low rates,
companies,
yeah.
0.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that just needs to be lowered in general, but the loopholes also need to be closed. But then on the other side of it, at a time when unemployment is as it is, when our economic situation and job opportunities are as they are, I feel like we're also, frankly, making it too difficult and intimidating and creating disincentives for those who just say you have, a hobby or a trade or something that you just want to try to make money doing. Well, our tax
Yeah.
code on the individual side, small business, independent contractor, this, that, and the other, it's very confusing. It's very convoluted. And we're at a point where now you're like, oh my God, the IRS might come after me.
It discourages
And
entrepreneurship.
Exactly. It really
Yeah.
does.
You just hit on another thing that drove me out of the Democratic Party,
Yeah.
actually, was that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are two sides. But then you look at, the small and everything in between. And through our regulatory environment, we're creating a situation where the companies that, did take the impetus and actually do that and are trying to grow, they get to a point where, they have things like the Affordable Care Act saying, you have to, to be able to afford your employees, you have to cut them, change them from full-time to part-time, this, that, and the other. And they find, there are these new, regulations. So do I have the lawyers and accountants to be able to hire to, find loopholes or make sure I'm in compliance? No, a lot of the time they don't. So
Right.
they'll just shut down.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's like we're attacking people and opportunity on all sides of it.
Yeah, I agree.
So it is unfortunate. And then when we come to, the side of then government support and the social safety net, there's so much waste going on over there too. And we're also creating disincentives for people. Like if they're going to be eligible for this or that subsidy, they can only make so much money, so they're not going to look for another job or try to get a better education. So it's really a mess.
Yeah, to me, the all that stuff should be local.
Yeah, I agree.
I went on. I've got glaucoma. I knew 10 plus years ago that at some point my vision was not going to be good enough to be a toolmaker. It's you got to have pretty good vision to be a toolmaker. And I went to the state office for the Social Security or disability, whatever it is. And I said, what I'd like to do is take a job that I could end up being in a career in, and you train me, and instead of me going on full disability, try to work it out so that you get like you comp, like in other words, say I'm making $25 an hour. You give me like $5 an hour, so I can take this job at 15. I'll make less money, but I won't lose my house, and then I can earn my way back up, or some sort of system instead of just going on disability. But no, they wouldn't even talk to you till you get that doctor's note that you can't do your job anymore. They don't even want to have anything to do with you, and it's just it's ridiculous. Now, if that was local, and I went down to the town clerk and said, hey, this is what's going on. I show them the doctor's information. They could probably work something out because they know me. They know I'm a taxpayer. I've been there for X number of years. But as long as everything's dictated from the federal government, you can't do that.
It's not flexible and it's not personal or humane, to be honest.
Yeah, and so the only people that really do get help, or don't get help, but the people that know the system can abuse the system, and the people that need the system don't know the system well enough to actually get help.
Yeah.
And it's like I had a friend of mine I used to work with. He lost his job. He lived in Manchester. He lost his job. His girlfriend lost her job, and wife. And they went down to the welfare offices. I need some help. We just lost our job. We're going to get kicked out of our apartment. We're going to be homeless. And I said, well, you guys are married? Yeah. If you were divorced, I could help you, because then she'd be,
Right.
So they're encouraging divorce.
Yeah, or people to not get married.
To people not get married.
Too, yeah.
Which brings me to one of the things I wanted to point out tonight. There was a Sean Bergen, if I get the name correctly, is a reporter in New Jersey. And he was interviewing a woman whose husband had killed a cop in New Jersey. And I think it was husband or son. But anyway, interviewing this woman. And she was saying, well, he should have shot more of them. And so this reporter reported that, and then went on a tirade about the problem with this city, this area, Bergen, New Jersey, is the biggest problem is fatherlessness. That you get all these children growing up without fathers, and that's what happens. You end up with high crime rates and everything else. And he just got canned for it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Even though it's the truth.
Right.
You're not allowed to speak the truth anymore.
Not if it's politically incorrect.
We only have a couple minutes, but I remember what the other one was. Is one of the things I hear going around campaigning, and I don't quite understand why it's that big a deal in New Hampshire, but a lot of people are asking about their federal officers to do something about the immigration. What's your stance on the immigration issue?
I think overall, as with so many things, we just keep failing to fix problems and just exacerbate them, one way or another. And then overall, my general thought is we make it too easy to stay here illegally and too difficult to stay here legally. It's just gotten to, look at this recent situation. It's, it built up over time. At the end of the day, I think the basic problem is that our border isn't secure. This wouldn't happen if people couldn't just come here, So any reform you do, I think, has to start with that. But it's funny how, despite all of that's involved in that, what happens at the end of the day? It's the president asking for $4 billion so they can, throw money at the problem, basically, but not actually fix it. Yeah. And then it can just happen again in a number of years. So I'd like to see reform, looking at all of the different areas, be it, border security, the visa process, the guest workers, temporary, all of it. We need to make common sense, correct decisions that keep the rights of Americans sovereign, and then make sure the process is fair for everybody else. That's what we have to do. And I really don't appreciate this, the comprehensive approach, be it healthcare, immigration. To me, that means comprehensive reform always means some bill that has some good things that are actual reforms and then some awful things. And if you vote for it, you're a traitor. If you vote against it, you're an obstructionist.
Right.
And then you're a do-nothing Congress because nothing
insight.
gets done,
Yeah.
Why can't we vote on, different pieces of it that we agree need to happen?
Because that doesn't motivate people, doesn't get enough money in the Republican or Democratic coffers.
Well,
We got a caller.
Yeah, we're going to see if they're still there.
Hello?
Caller, we got a minute. Go ahead. Hello?
Oh,
Hey, quickly. What you got?
hi, I'm a Manchester resident. I was just listening to your program and watching it, and I had a question as I was watching
Yep, go ahead.
talk. Hello?
Yep, go ahead. We're about out of time. What's your question?
Well, I wonder last time any administration had taken a serious look at the tax code. I know Ronald Reagan tore that apart back in the early 80s. And I just didn't know where that stood. How those
Yeah, we
something like that could be addressed.
well we did talk about that actually, simplifying the tax code. I think Marilinda did address that earlier. All right.
Yeah. I just it kind of sort of favored the rich back in the '80s, and I just didn't. I know that maybe taking some of that apart and reintroducing some different ideas to that would play a bigger part in
Definitely.
the situation that.
Definitely needs to be addressed. All right. Well, we're out of show, so we got to go. But thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, he's right. The tax code is ridiculous. The fact that you need an accountant to do your taxes most of the time is insane.
Absolutely.
For most people, it should be on a little card.
Yeah.
If
Can I just, in our last waning moments,
Yes,
share
waning. Go
my,
wane away.
my website and all?
Oh,
please,
yeah.
If
sorry.
anybody, I don't actually know exactly your coverage, but if any of you are in District 2, which is basically the west side of the state, not including Manchester, but some surrounding areas, I would love your support running for Congress, and my website is marilindagarcia.com. So that's MarilindaGarcia.com. So Marilinda's all one
it's a
word.
nice Irish name.
And there you could learn more about me, my campaign, what's going on. Love your support. Tell your friends. Host a meet and greet. Whatever. So thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Marilinda.
guys.
Yeah, thank you for
Appreciate
coming
And
on.
we'll see you next week we got Frank Saporetto.
All right.
We'll
Sounds
see ya.
good. Bye, everybody.